In this video, I'm going to show you how to rebuild an X-Maxx shock. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Troy. This is Roadside RC. You'll tend to find me bashing or crawling or drifting or racing, plus doing product review videos and how-tos. And one of the common things that I have on my Traxxas X-Maxx is I either break or bend these shock rods. I haven't found any good suitable upgrades for them online. I tend to just have to continue to buy 7763 shock rods, and I tend to replace them. So I'm going to walk you through today how I do that with these shocks, so that way you are prepared to do it for the next time yours breaks. The first step is to get this spring off in order to free up all the other parts that we need to get to. It means we're going to take this screw loose to free up the spring rod and the spring perch, get that out of the way and get the spring off. If you have recently rebuilt your shock, or if your shocks are really pretty new and you're not worried about changing the fluid out, you can actually do this whole fix upside down by taking this lower collar off, and then the whole rod and the piston, everything inside that you need to replace comes out as one, and you can leave the fluid in there. I, however, have not touched these shocks in a while, so I'm going to go ahead and actually make sure I dump the fluid out and put new fluid in. You can do this two ways. You can either take the shock cap off and actually dump it out, or you can do it in this way down here. There we go. You can take the whole thing out just like that, and this is the part that we're going to end up replacing while we keep some of this right in here. Again, fluid is in there, so again, you can dump it out and replace the fluid if you would like. I've already dumped the fluid out, so I'm going to go ahead and take this cap off on this side. It's going to let me check the whole shock out and rebuild it more appropriately, plus give it a good thorough cleaning while I'm here. Might as well, I got the whole thing apart. This portion here is our main focus for today because that rod is bent, so we are going to use our shock pliers to hold the shock shaft. We are going to use our little handy T-wrench to take off this nut that holds the piston and everything on. As you take this off, note that you have the nut itself, which I just dropped, of course. And as you pull this off, you see that washer there. It's very important to have that washer and keep that washer on there. Then you're going to take this whole lower assembly off, all as one unit, just like that. And then this is the now bent and useless shock shaft that can go in the trash can. Reassembly is pretty straightforward. A lot of times I have oil and stuff on my hands. I have oil coming out of the shock. I'll go ahead and pre-lube the shaft a little bit to make sure that as we put this on, we're not putting anything dry through those rubber O-rings that are in there. You will find that there is some resistance as it goes on. So now we have this on. Again, we're going to come back with that washer and the piston before we put our lock nut on. Tighten it all down. With this whole assembly created, this rides nice and free, this is nice and tight, everything here is good. We're going to place this back into the shock body and screw this down nice and tight so it seals, and now it's time to fill this full of fluid. The stock X-Maxx shock oil is actually a 30 weight. You can go thicker or thinner depending on what your desires are and how you drive the vehicle. I'm actually putting some 45 in here today. That is what I've been running. Have a big bottle of it, and that's what I've been running on it. So once I fill that up, we're going to pull it back out of this container. We're going to move that piston up and down. Boom! Did you see that big bubble that came out? Oh yeah, now I need to put a lot more in there. So you need to continue to move the shock piston up and down to make sure you get all the oil out of this shock. And yes, it does take a lot of shock oil. It is a very big shock, of course. So you're going to pump that up and down and get all that oil out of the shock. Or all the air out of it, sorry. So you're going to pump it up and down as you feel that there. You will see air bubbles coming out to the surface and popping. You should see more air bubbles coming up and down. You're going to continue to do that. You're going to set the shock over here to the side. Go ahead and top it off one more time, pretty close to the top. Now we're gonna let it sit for probably like something like 5 minutes while we let all those air bubbles that are up here, you can't see it in the camera probably, but I have lots of little air bubbles and I can see them popping along the surface. We wanna wait till all those air bubbles are gone before we put the cap on. So we're just gonna now pause, we'll come back in a few minutes. It's now been about 5 minutes or so, and all those bubbles have now dissipated out of the top. Now this is very important. It is not as important for a basher spec, but if you're doing racing or drifting or something like that, where the exact shock specs really do matter a lot, where you leave the piston as you put this bladder in really does matter. If you leave the piston all the way out as you slide the bladder in, it will naturally want to kind of come back to that position. If you leave it all the way in, it'll naturally want to come back there. I typically leave mine somewhere in the middle. I will then slide this in very carefully. You may squish some fluid out, but your whole goal here is to not get any air in to that system as you do it. I'm going to then put the cap on, and it is easy to over tighten this X-Maxx cap. That is very easy to do and deform that O-ring, and then you'll start to get some leakage out of the top there. So this is tight, but it's not crazy tight. It's just tight enough to seal that gap up there at the top. Clean off all your excess fluid. If you've moved your shock preload collar, good time to move it back to wherever you want it. Then very simply, we're going to, well, first we're going to confirm, as you do this, you shouldn't hear any air bubbles. Should be nice and smooth the whole way, and you shouldn't feel any unusual resistance. It should be a smooth resistance the whole way. And you shouldn't hear any pop cracks or anything like that, kind of air bubble sounds at the top. So this one sounds great. Sounds like we did it just right. We're going to slide the spring back on along with the spring perch. Don't forget that screw that's in there as part of that spring perch. Put that screw right back in. Now we have one very good looking, very good working X-Maxx shock ready to be installed back on the truck. There we go, shock is all installed back here, looking great. If you have any questions about what I did or how I did it, why I did it, please put them down in the comment section below. I'm happy to try to help in any way that I can and get your X-Maxx back up and running. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.